Format is going to be that Juan will give a brief introduction, and then we're going to have a question and answer. Many questions came in, so we synthesized these. Some we combined, and some we actually didn't get to. But it's our hope that we will get to the questions that we have. And if we have time, if there are questions that you have, you can put them in the chat, although I suspect we're not going to get to them. And therefore, what I would ask is that if you have a question and you put it in the chat and you would like us to, we would like Juan to follow up, to just note that, and we will do our best to get everyone an answer after this town hall. So we're going to have the questions and answers, and then Juan will do a wrap up. Okay. And at this particular point, I want to, before people are coming in, maybe I should talk a little slow. Juan, you don't mind starting and getting interrupted, do you? Juan is frozen, so he's going to have to go off and go back on. Unfortunately, Juan's tech is acting up a bit, and although you'll hear him, he keeps freezing. So he got off, he's going to come back. So Juan is going to begin with an introduction, and I'm going to just remind Juan that we're trying to keep it, succinct. And also, although you might want to discuss Oracle, that will be a question that's coming up. So I'm going to turn it over to our chief. Here we are, our sheriff, Juan Figueroa. You're on, Juan.
Good afternoon, everybody. And first and foremost, I want to thank you all for being at this town hall event. And I want to thank all the organizers, Indivisible, and all the folks that took their time on Sunday to come and hear me speak. It's been a tough year for a lot of us with this pandemic, and I hope that you're all healthy. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what happened last year, my second year in office, and the challenges that came with 2020. Of course, the biggest thing is the opioid epidemic. We had a huge increase in overdoses, both regular overdoses and fatal overdoses. We had an increase in crime. Those crimes are larceny, burglaries, domestic violence. Of course, we know about the shootings and the homicides in the city of Kingston. And we've also had a lot of car accidents involving personal injury. New laws that came into effect were Bail Reform 1, Bail Reform 2. The pandemic causing the courts to close. All of our programs at the jail closed, visitation stopped. We had to go to virtual courts. For 9 months, and I'm gonna have to, forgive me that I keep freezing up. For 9 months, we kept COVID at bay at the jail, but eventually it hit us at the second part. We had 23 inmates that had COVID-19, and thank God it was isolated to one housing unit. We also had 19 corrections officers that got COVID-19, and one passed away from complications of COVID-19. And we had 8 deputies that had it. As you know, we're a 24/7 operation, so we're constantly working and out there. Some of the other things that came up, of course, were the budget cuts due to the pandemic. Discovery was another law that was passed. We had civil unrest due to law enforcement and the history of law enforcement with people of color and underprivileged people. And so the commissions were started. The task force that I was on with the county actually started in January, and then the commission started after the governor signed Executive Order 203. And then we also had to deal with all the pause complaints that came with folks that weren't wearing a mask, and we're trying to, protect people from catching COVID-19. Since taking office, I supported the Green Light Law, and I lobbied with a lot of the Ulster County immigration here to help pass that law. I put a new policy in place on immigration, and to assure that every person in this county has a due process of law. And of course, we were not cooperating with ICE. There was a new use of force policy. I revamped the complaints against personnel policy, hate crimes policy, conduct of members. In 2019, I applied for an Oracle grant. We didn't get it, but we did get it this past year, and I'll talk about that later on. That grant was for $900,000. We also had grants for body cameras, which is $70,000, live scan. The United States Coast Guard gave us a grant for a brand new boat, and we are now members of the North Hudson Task Force. We had multiple personnel changes and reassignments, the most in more than 2 decades at the Sheriff's Office. We had the first African-American superintendent of corrections, the first woman supervisor in the history of the criminal division. We have a former assistant district attorney, chief civil administrator, who is now the commander of the drug task force, Urgent. So there's a civilian oversight, and he's an attorney that oversees our task force. There's new leadership in Urgent, and they work hand in hand with Oracle. And who would have known that not only would the members of the Ulster County Sheriff's Office investigate dealers, but they would put folks into rehab, help family, and even those dealers would get help and sent into rehab. Urgent also focuses on mid-level and upper-level dealers. We're no longer targeting any small-time street folks. I put in place an equal opportunity compliance officer, sent them down to Cornell University in New York City, and that also came with a new EEOC policy that the office never had before. Hired a professional standards investigator who had no ties to the agency or the county, and he assists in internal affairs, sensitive investigations to include implicit bias complaints against our personnel at the Sheriff's Office. He's a retired member of the New York City Police, and he's African American. I also hired a discovery coordinator who's a civilian. In order to comply with the new discovery law, we have to put video body cams and reports that have to be submitted to both defense attorneys and the district attorney's office. I assigned a member to the Hudson Valley Crime Analysis Center that gives our county access to regional crime patterns and intel. We also had a new body scanner machine, so there's no more demeaning strip searches at the jail. We also have a discharge planner and a member from Family of Woodstock to help us put folks into housing if they don't have housing. We renewed our accreditation for the Corrections Division and Civil Division to assure we're up to New York State standards. We cover 42 miles on the Hudson River. We're a member of the North Hudson United States Coast Guard Task Force. We can deal with emergencies involving cargo ship, heritage oil, our recreational borders, our rails that go up and down the Hudson, and our bridges, which are soft targets. We also recently, last week, joined the Federal Law Enforcement Task Force focusing on human trafficking, protecting our immigrant community from illicit sex trade, and unfair labor practices. I've also assured that we're hiring more diverse folks in the Sheriff's Office. We've hired African Americans, women, Latinos, and persons with disabilities, and I'm pretty proud of that. This office, and including this sheriff, and the people demanded that we do additional training in regards to how we interact with our citizens. And just this past week, we had 13 members that graduated the first officer-citizen interaction training, which deals with escalation. And we're also going to do implicit bias training with both commissions.
Juan, you're answering all the questions.
Well, I'm just going through some of the things that I accomplished the last 2 years. Of course, I was on the Legislative Criminal Justice Task Force that started in January, and the Executive Order 203 Commission, which started when the governor signed and put out that executive order. And with that, we are going to have 2 new forms. One's a right to know form. So there'll be business cards that'll show you how to access our complaint and accommodations website with forms. We're also going to have a new app, which will be user-friendly to our citizens. We also did an odor recognition form. There was an argument, or not an argument, but a point that African Americans were being targeted because, and the usual excuse was, your vehicle smells like marijuana. Well, now we have a form, and we can document what these officers are doing and stopping. That new app is going to help us better communicate with our community. We'll have the VINE program, which lets our victims know when someone's going to get released from jail. And again, you'll have access to our accommodations, our complaints, and our policies. And that's it in a nutshell. So thank you very much.
Okay, great. Thanks, Juan. And I didn't mean to be rude to cut you off, but as you're talking, I'm thinking, oh, he answered this question. He answered this question. So in any event, I'm going to go to the first question here. And it's from Kathy from Shandaken, and with a little follow-up from Jackie from New Paltz. Can you give us an update on your program initiative, specifically the medically assisted treatment for people during incarceration? And the follow-up to that is, have people who have served time gone through Oracle Initiative? Have they been able to receive ongoing care? And if not, what have been the barriers?
Well, the pandemic has really affected our programs in the jail, but we did start the medical assistant treatment program, part one, I call it, January of last year. So if you came to the Ulster County Jail and you had a previous prescription that you fell off of, we'll put you back on it. We had about 30 people in the program so far, and we have about 10 that are still in the program. Oracle has really, it's a miracle story for me personally, and the team at the Sheriff's Office that runs it. There were 4 phases. The first phase was the trailer, which marks a home, so we can show people. It's the education awareness portion of letting people know what to look for if somebody's addicted or afflicted with addiction with opioids in their homes. You would get Narcan training, and then you would get phone numbers where you can call and get assistance. Part 2 is the Oracle team. We set up an email, a hotline, and if you have an overdose, you can pick up the phone and call. No one's going to get arrested. Our main job was to get that individual into rehab and to help the families, because there's a huge stigma associated with this opioid epidemic. And the families are struggling. They wouldn't call law enforcement because they're afraid they would have to pay bail if they got their loved ones got arrested, or obviously they would have to pay for an attorney. So there's a huge victimization pool. If somebody stole from a family member, they just weren't law enforcement. So we got a $900,000 grant this past November. And I'm excited to say, for the first time in the history of law enforcement here in Ulster County and in the Hudson Valley, and I don't know if any sheriff's office in New York State that has this, we're going to have a social worker, 2 peer advocates, and administrative assistant that works for the sheriff embedded at the sheriff's office to go out with these teams to help people get into rehab and to tailor a program for family members. And this is open to every single law enforcement agency in the county and every family in the county that needs assistance. And I'm excited about it. We're in the process of hiring them. And again, this is trailblazing stuff. And I'm really proud of the team that's been working on it. We partnered up with the Department of Health and the county exec's office. And the second time was a charm. We got this grant the second time around. And I'm really proud of our partners, Ellenville Hospital, who has a NET program. So this NET program, every time we have a person that enters this program, we're going to follow them through. We're going to follow them for at least a year so they don't fall through the cracks. And so this is the great future that we have here in Ulster County, and that's in conjunction with all of our partners. And I'm pretty happy about that. We're still in the process of hiring people. Because of COVID, some of our members actually got it that were doing the interviews, and then they started to do Zooms. So we're still trying to catch up, and hopefully by the middle of the end of this month, we'll have all those folks in place, and I'll put a news conference out so you can all meet them. The other part of that is that the MAP program will continue to move forward. We're going to give the program, whether it's methadone, whether it's Suboxone, whether it's Vivitrol, or if people just want to go cold turkey and stop, we're gonna, because not everything works for everybody. We're gonna give those options to folks that come into the facility. And the reason why that's important is, again, we've never done that before, and it's something that Our vendor Prime Care is already doing up in New Hampshire. I actually took a trip up to New Hampshire and I grabbed their Bible, as they call it, and how they screen everybody and how they do testing to make sure that these folks actually are afflicted by addiction. And a lot of folks don't even want to say that they're afflicted by addiction, and you can tell who they are because they're going through really bad withdrawals. So it's a lot cheaper to get somebody help and put them on their feet to keep them here, continue to go to jail for, in reality, they're not true criminals. They're just doing these crimes so they can support their habits. So
Okay.
this
We're
is
gonna move.
completely changing the way law enforcement works.
Okay, I'm good. I'm just concerned because we have so many questions here. So the question number 3 is from Deidre from Socrates, and she says, how is trust built for law enforcement if there is a culture of protecting the bad ones? I guess that's like the blue wall of silence. How do we purge law enforcement of the racists that are most definitely entrenched in law enforcement throughout the country?
Well,
You're frozen, Juan. You're gonna have to go off and go on again. There he goes. Okay, he's back.
Okay. I'm sorry about that, guys. So how do we build that trust? Well, first thing I did when I took office was updating all those policies that I spoke about earlier, and then educate everyone on those policies. And then the training that we're putting in, that officer-citizen interaction course, the implicit bias training that we're getting from folks down at SUNY New Paltz, and of course the complaint system. We want people to feel comfortable that they can make a complaint and it's going to be handled, and that individuals are held accountable for the things that they do. We're also going to open up training to our citizens. So our training will be posted on that app and the website when we get it up and going. And if folks want to come to the training, they can see what we're training, whether it's crisis intervention or implicit bias training. And the reason why we do this training is if the folks don't do what they're trained to do, then they're going to get written up and they're held accountable. And so we are doing what we can to change that behavior. And I can assure you that if people violate any of our new policies that were put in place, they're going to be held accountable.
Great, thank you. I'm going to skip and jump ahead and may come back to one. This one is from 2 different people, Alana from Rosendale and Marjorie from Saugerties. So there are 2 parts of this. We have been hearing cases of undocumented Ulster County residents being threatened with eviction by their landlords during COVID-19. They are afraid that their citizenship status makes them more vulnerable. What should they do when that happens? And the second part of that question, so it's a 2-parter, since it's your responsibility to carry out court-ordered evictions and there aren't affordable alternatives for tenants being forced out, what can you do in your position and influence to help tenants in this situation? So it's both the immigrants and the affordable housing in general. So if you can answer that.
Our best friends like you and Yogi, and even Helene, you all joined ugly.
Can whoever that is, could you mute yourself, please?
Okay. So I've gotten phone calls from our religious leaders throughout the county in regards to illegal evictions, in particular to the immigrant community. The chief civil administrator, his name is Jared Blades. You can call our office, which is 338-3640. As I froze again here, hold on. 338-3640. And ask for our civil division the chief, and his name is Jared Blades. He's also an attorney, and he went to the civil school and he's trained on these particular issues, and especially now with this pandemic, how people are struggling, not just the tenants, but the taxpayers that are the landlords too. I mean, and then we have pretty bad landlords as well. There's also the county put in place a program that the public defender's office is running, and I'll just read their numbers out real quick. It's 443-8822 and 303 5503. And these folks, as well as our chief civil administrator, will call up the landlords and tell them to desist, that they're violating the law and that they're going to get arrested. So sorry about that, folks. I don't know why this is freezing on me. So we know the issues that are out there. Like, again, I've gotten phone calls and we have handled it, or we have given the number to the county public defender's office to assist these folks. And it's quite unfortunate that all this is going on, but you can call me, you can email me, or the public defender's office, and they will definitely try to assist. The state also has a COVID rent relief program, and I emailed that, and their phone number is 833-499-0318. And you must be a renter. You must have a primary residence in New York State, and you have to prove that your income was obviously affected due to the pandemic. That pertains to that situation. But I can also tell you that we're worried and concerned about what's going to happen when that moratorium lifts on these renters. When it comes time to start evicting people. Of course, I'm going to look at it on a case-by-case basis, and I'm going to be fair, but it's tough to do that when a court orders me in the office to evict people. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to have discussions with our judges and our chief civil administrator to be fair. And I think if they take advantage of that program and we handle these on a case-by-case basis, then perhaps we can try and assist some of these folks. We also spoke, I spoke to certain groups around the county about a private sector approach. When I first ran for office, we had folks that were putting together a bail fund. So if individuals needed bail, that they were going to bail them out. I think we should think about putting something like that together for our renters, because I think it's going to be a big issue here when that moratorium lifts sometime in March or April. So we're really concerned. I am in contact with the county exec's office in regards to this. So we are talking and we are devising plans on how to kind of offset all these evictions that are going to come.
Great, thank you. If anyone of us, our team here, took down the phone numbers, there's a request that you put the phone numbers in the chat. Not you, Juan, because you have to focus. Let your team do it. Okay, the next.
By the way, I'll email that to you, Christine, and you can post it.
Okay, great. Okay. This comes from Phyllis from West Hurley. And she said, how are you dealing with the Kingston African Americans community's charges of police stop and frisk as a form of harassment with the vehicle stops going on in Kingston?
And I think we're talking about the blue and gray patrols that occurred in a 10-week period. So this was kind of copied from Safe Streets, the Safe Streets program that took place in the city of Newburgh. What happened in the city of Kingston was unprecedented. We had over a dozen shootings and 5 unsolved homicides, and people were complaining, what are we going to do? One of the issues, of course, is the lack of trust between the community and law enforcement. And how can we mend that fence? And law enforcement, although it's always attacked that we show a bigger presence, which is what occurred here. I think we supplied one double patrol and a K9 patrol, but the majority of the influx was from the state police. But we worked on this together. The good results were that there were just a handful of shootings during that 10-week period and 0 homicides. And I'm sure you guys heard just the last couple of days, there were a couple of shootings again in the city of Kingston. One individual got shot in the leg. But going back to the stop and frisk, these individuals that were on that detail were picked so they can talk and interact with the community. And I wrote some of the numbers down because I thought I got the numbers from these patrols. There were 1,420 encounters, 1,144 warnings were given, 217 arrests, and 59 tickets issued. So the the people needed, and law enforcement needed to do something in regards to these shootings and the homicides. And they were focused on the Fourth Ward because that's where the majority of these shootings were occurring. And I personally went and walked around on 2 separate weekends, and I continue to have discussions with the community every Tuesday at 7 o'clock, and it's usually at either New Progressive Church or one of the other local churches. We haven't had it in a couple of weeks because of either snowstorms or the holidays. But we are going to start again next Tuesday at the New Progressive Church. So what was supposed to happen was we're supposed to have a community town hall with everyone prior to this 10-week operation to commence, but that never happened due to the pandemic. I understand the concerns because when I was walking through there, although the folks were happy to see law enforcement, in particular the state police and the sheriff's office, they were upset because they were stopped for, going through a stop sign or no tail light or no headlight. But a majority of those folks, 80% of them were given warnings. They were not given tickets. And that was, believe it or not, a way to try and talk and interact with the folks. And I know it was difficult for a lot of people to have that many law enforcement in their community, but there was we were at a situation that we had to do something, and the results were, like I said, there were just a handful of shootings while that was going on and 0 homicides, so it did work.
Great, thank you. Here's a question from Carol from Malden on the Hudson. And her question is, part of the call for alternative policing is the need for mental health workers instead of police in certain cases. She gives the example of domestic violence and mental health situations. How is the Sheriff's Department implementing appropriate responses to these cases that clearly need alternative responses to police? What is your plan to incorporate having mental health teams dispatched with police in emotionally disturbed persons calls, which I believe is how it's phrased?
So first of all, domestic violence is a crime, so we will continue to go to those calls. We are going through crisis intervention training. We are our first training in December, and we're going to do it again sometime in the near future in the spring. And crisis intervention, again, talks about de-escalating situations, the same as this officer interaction training that our folks just graduated and passed this past week. As far as dealing with mental health issues, I feel good about joining with our mental health experts to go out and assist law enforcement in these endeavors. Remember, it was about 25, 30 years ago when the government shut down all of these facilities and it became law enforcement's responsibility. However, with that said, there's got to be guidelines put in place for the protection and safety of these mental health workers that are going to go to homes where we know, for example, there were multiple calls there on whether the individuals own weapons, where the mental health expert doesn't know that information. So we're looking to get together with the mental health experts, mobile mental health, and to, assign those parameters and those protocols to protect everybody, and eventually, at some point, hand that over some of those responsibilities to mobile mental health. But that transition is going to take a while because we have to focus on the safety of the individuals that are responding. But yes, I think it's a great idea, and I think it's something that's needed in law enforcement. And I look forward to meeting with mobile mental health and try to get a plan together.
Thank you. I want to go back. I'm going to do a follow-up on the stops that happened in Kingston. And I remember having a conversation with you, Juan, saying, I drive through that neighborhood. I'm white and I was never stopped there. And I was wondering if you have the stats in terms of the racial breakdown of the stops. I know I'm putting you on the spot. You might not have it handy, but if you do, or if you don't have the specific, do you know if in fact it seemed to be more targeting people of color than white people?
So I'm gonna see if I can find in my email, because I got those stats from the blue and gray patrols, and they did they break it down. Hold on one
I say,
second.
if you don't have it, I mean, maybe that's something that we could send out to people, because it might be of interest in terms of, we're all looking for data and demographics and how that plays out. So you,
Actually, I have I got it right in front of me here.
oh, look at
So,
that. Okay, great.
Of the arrests, white males made up 47.47%. White females were 15.21%. Black males made up 31.34%, and black females were 5%. And yes, if you look at the overall numbers of the city of Kingston, the numbers obviously show that it seems that African Americans were targeted, but I would say that those particular neighborhoods that the issues were happening were in African American communities. So, you know, I look at the numbers like everybody else does, and we also look at complaints, and we did get a few complaints, but the complaints were minimal compared to the results that we got, that there were no homicides and the shootings were reduced by almost 80%.
I really appreciate that, Juan, because as you were speaking, it popped into my head and I kind of went backward here. So thanks for dealing with finding stats on the run here. My next question is, it's from both Chris, it's a combined one, Chris from Lloyd and Maggie from New Paltz. So it's a two-parter. The governor's executive order 203 mandate to reform and reinvent policing has led to many leaders of the Black and Brown community to call for community review boards to strengthen police accountability. Considering that the ability to vote a member of Congress out of office has proven inadequate for holding them accountable, how can we expect the same mechanism to hold you and your department accountable to the community you exercise so much power over? So that's the first question. And there's a follow-up to that, which is, what evidence-based measures will you put in place to assure the public that changes you are making will be effective and that police will be accountable to the community? So you can take both of them together, or you could start with how is it that elections will hold you accountable when they generally don't hold national?
So congressional races are completely different than a local county race. I get elected directly from the folks in the county where a congressman has multiple counties and towns. So the way it's kind of, I guess you could say, gerrymandered. This is not gerrymandered because the elections for everyone in the county. So that's a whole different race, that of the sheriff, which is more localized than that of a congressman or a national election. I represent the people of Ulster County. I'm just the caretaker of the seat of sheriff. I am the sheriff because the people elect me to do that. Review boards, and I say that because the sheriff is elected, whereas the state police superintendent, the police commissioner in New York City, or your local chiefs are appointed by the towns. They can have 4 or 5 year contracts. My situation is different because I was elected by the electorate. I do have an oversight, and my review board is the Ulster County Legislature, which I meet sometimes twice a month, the Law Enforcement Public Safety Committee, the Ways and Means Committee. I also have oversight from the county attorney's office when I do policies. If there's any criminal activity that occurs within this office and they don't want me to investigate, the district attorney's office has oversight, and so does the attorney general's office. I am not opposed, though, however, to having an advisory board. When you talk about review boards, what exactly are we saying? Are you going to say that we're looking to how we, have the review board hire people, fire people, and do discipline? Then there's no real need for the office of sheriff. And I think, understanding that is very important because it's the only elected office in law enforcement that you're the county chief, if you will, the sheriff. So I am accountable to the people. Number one, to the elected legislature, and of course, I'm accountable to the people. When I get elected, and just like what recently happened to my predecessor, he stated he was going to comply with ICE, and if you didn't like it, vote him out. That's exactly what happened. He got voted out, and it was the people that voted him out, and it's the people that hold this office. I'm just the face of it because they put me in it. But when I talk to people in my office, I let them know that they're talking to the people of Ulster County when they talk to Juan Figueroa, because that's who I represent.
Thank you. In terms of the evidence-based measures, that's another point of it in terms of you're putting things together for oversight and accountability. How are you going to make sure that works?
One of the biggest things is that of transparency. As you see, I believe that we do have, everyone now has in my office a body cam. So when something goes wrong, we're immediately going to go to that body cam to review it. We also have to put out our policies so the public can see them. Our complaint, process, our forms to make a complaint. There are some folks that don't feel comfortable in even, making complaints. But I believe that we need to learn how to trust each other. And you can always pick up the phone and call me directly or email me and hold me accountable if something that happens wasn't handled in a fashion, in a correct fashion. We're going to set up a dashboard. One of the results of the commission was that we're going to set up a dashboard to put out information to the public, and that information, which we haven't sat down and detailed out, that's going to be done at the county legislature, at the Public Safety Law Enforcement Committee, but that is going to entail statistics and data so the public can see what this office is doing and how we're doing it. I do want to be careful though about stats. I worked in New York City for 19 years with the New York State Police and an additional 5 years in the corporate world in New York City. And what I noticed about the stats that they use ComStat in New York City is that they wanted to downgrade the crimes that were occurring because they didn't want to go in front of their commanders, and they wanted to show that the crime rate was low by not reporting actual crimes. And to me, that's a major issue. And that's something that can happen when we start looking at data and manipulating data. So that is one of my concerns.
Just a follow-up of that, in your time in office thus far, have you had a situation where you've made a decision on a complaint that came from the community that they were not satisfied and they kicked it up to someone? Has that happened at this point in your 2 years here?
I have not, but I will say something I'm not proud of, that this office has had more disciplinary hearings in the last 2 years than they had in many, many years. It's about putting new rules and regulations in place, training people, and when they don't do what they're trained to do, well, they're going to be held accountable. Remember, I was a complete outsider coming into this office. I'm from the state police, and although I knew some of the old timers, the 99% of the people there, I did not know, and that's a good thing because I was able to see, like in any other job, when you have someone that you work with for 20 or 25 years, you start to be family and friends, and instead of actually knowing that you're doing the job. And my first couple of months was, but he's a good guy, and I'm like, I don't want to hear if he's a good guy or she's a good worker. I want to hear, are they doing their job? That's what I want to hear. And so that's been something that I've been focusing on. Policies are living documents. You have to update it all the time. Right after the homicide of Mr. Floyd, I changed the policy to specifically say no chokeholds, even though we haven't done chokeholds or trained chokeholds in years in New York. As an accredited agency, I wanted to make sure that the members of this office knew that.
Great, thank you. I'm wanting to go to a question now from Susan in Woodstock. What have you and your staff discussed regarding attracting and retaining both people of color and women to the department? And do officers feel put upon, or do they understand the impact of disparate policing and the ongoing need to be more transparent and engaged in issues of justice?
So I've hired, first of all, we have a cadet program. And one thing I briefly talked about before was the Citizens Academy, which we're going to put in place in the upcoming months when the pandemic ends. And again, we're going to open up training, seats available only, of course, to the, if we have seats available to the public. And, but I have hired African-Americans more than I think anybody in this office has. I said I had the first superintendent of corrections that's African-American. I recently hired 2 of our former cadets from the city of Kingston who are African-Americans, and the first, one of the first Latinos besides myself in the office, again from, I think he's from Port Ewing. So we've been hiring folks, and I've also I've engaged with civil service, which really curtails what we do when hiring bans. So you know we're doing top 3 from 95 to 100, and then 90 to 95. I'm asking civil service to do a 10 band so we can do 90s to 100 rather than, and it just opens up the pool. But in order to get to those scores, we are doing something here that needs to be done, and that is preparing folks to take the exam, preparing folks to do the interview, preparing our Latinos and African Americans on what the test is. And I'm partnering up with Ulster County Community College, who already runs the academy, to do that prep course, including the agility test, because I can't tell you how many times these young kids can't run a mile and a half. So now at this prep course, we're going to have them understand what they need to do in order to get in the door. We definitely need to change how we do our recruitment, and I'll talk about that at the end. But we are going to be recruiting better. And I am a strong believer that diversifying the office, people can understand each other when you work with each other. There are folks in the Latino community who rather talk to a Latino officer because they feel more comfortable and they understand their cultures. And I think that's extremely important. So diversifying the office is something I've been doing since I took office, and I'm very proud of that.
Do you have blowback from anyone?
If I did, I didn't care.
From Medeli in Port Ewing, what retraining efforts are planned for deputies who have to encounter people of color regularly? So training. So
we're doing implicit bias training at SUNY. Nepal's professor, Ed Lawson's doing implicit bias training. I've been doing it since I've been here. By my own personal stories with the leadership, or when I see that young deputy out on the road when I'm out there, or when he's sitting at the desk, the training that they just went through, that officer interaction training, focuses on how you interact with people with different cultures, how to communicate better. And that's really the biggest problem that we have in law enforcement is communicating and de-escalating. But that's a societal issue because of the way millennials communicate. They're so used to texting. They're so used to looking at the, doing Zooms and Facebook, that they don't have that face-to-face interaction to communicate, and they don't know how to talk to people. There's inherently a difference when a trooper or a deputy stops somebody on the road for speeding. There's no real interaction. You give them a ticket and they're gone, where a detective or an investigator has to talk to people because they have to solve that crime, and they learn that. And so that's something that starts from the top. That's me, that communication, the importance of explaining everything that we do, and how that rolls down. And I've been working on that for the last 2 years, and I'll continue to train and hold people accountable when they don't look and use the training tools that they were given to accomplish the job that they have to do, which is to de-escalate and explain things to people and treat people with respect.
Thank you. Something just popped up in the chat. So I just want to, someone asked about data on the sheriff office website. Do you have the data listed on
The
demographics?
We don't. The website actually belongs to the county. We have to put in a request to put stuff on there, and it takes up to 2 weeks. I'm going to meet with IS and the folks at the county legislature to kind of change that. One of the commission findings was that we're going to do a dashboard, and that's where we're going to put that information. We're also putting together an app, and in that app, you're going to be able to make a complaint. You're going to be able to make a accommodation of an officer. You're going to be able to see all the policies that were updated for the sheriff's office. And you'll be able to go to a link and be able to look at all that information, to include in that dashboard is going to be certain data, is how many African Americans or Latinos were stopped during a certain period, whether it's quarterly, something that we're going to work out in the coming months with the county legislature.
When do you anticipate that app?
I think we should, well, the app should be done. We had a meeting on Friday. We're going to start testing it within a month. I'm hoping by June that app will be up and running.
Great, thanks. A question from Lisa from Gardner. Now that 50A has been repealed, and for those who don't know what 50A is, it's about the disciplinary records of the police officers. Now that that has been repealed, when and how will residents of Ulster County have access to the disciplinary records of officers?
So the way the law is written now is that, well, first of all, anyone will have access to anyone that had a complaint against the public. And you have to submit a FOIL request. Again, that's something that has to come, a request has to come with either a name or an organization name requesting that. Because it's just something that makes things more accountable to people when they want to know what it is that they're looking for. You can put in that FOIL request, and that information, that's going to be the complaint. Obviously not the name of the complainant, but the complaint, the investigation of what occurred, and the discipline. All that information is going to be included when you submit that FOIL request.
Great. I just want to say, I think you're going to have to clarify something, because something popped up in the chat, and it might be a misinterpretation perhaps, but someone is asking, how is the issue of de-escalation an issue about millennials? Like, how are millennials at fault for the I don't think you meant it that way, but
no, I didn't.
You might want to clarify what you meant about millennials communicating.
Right. What I meant by that is communication, the way we communicate today. Millennials are obviously one of those folks that don't communicate like I did. When I was a young trooper, we used the payphone call, or we had face-to-face interaction. I was really talking about communication, that we need to communicate better with all folks, not just millennials.
I assume that was a misinterpretation. Here's a question from Emma of Saugerties that's a bit, we can kind of piggyback on that in terms of de-escalation and responding to people in the community. This is the question. She said, at a recent town hall meeting, a police chief agreed with a statement that said, when confronted with a police officer, a member of the public should comply with orders, and if the person feels they've been unjustly treated, they can file a complaint. Do you agree with that statement?
No, I don't. I think everybody has a right to say what's on their mind. This is America, and just because a person is wearing a uniform or law enforcement doesn't mean that we're better than anybody else. And I think I go back to what I said before. It's communication, the way we communicate with people. We're trained to de-escalate and be able to understand. That wasn't me.
Someone please mute. Thanks.
But really, I mean, I think communication is the key here. I think that we in law enforcement have to understand that we work for the taxpayers. And if people get upset, then they have every right to make a complaint, and it's going to get looked at. And if you didn't do anything wrong, because it happens, people get traffic tickets, and people that got the ticket didn't like it, and they make a complaint. And then thank God we have these body cams now, so we can look and see what actually occurred. But the truth is that this is a new world today, and we need to respect each other and understand each other. And I think if somebody gets upset, then they have every right to be upset because they're taxpaying citizens.
Does would you say it would be a appropriate or an acceptable response if someone is interacting with a police officer that they ask for another police officer to come deal with the situation?
I mean, it depends. I have 5 deputies. A lot of people don't know this, but the state police is the largest footprint in most of the rural counties, including Ulster County. So we have 5 or 6 deputies working on a given shift spread out throughout the county. So there isn't going to be another officer that can respond, for example, up to the town of Hardenburg or Denning, where the only police force there is either a deputy or a trooper, and they could be 45 minutes away. So I think if what you would do is to try to talk with the officer, and if you have a complaint, make a complaint, but that's what the complaint process is for. Of course, if you're in an area where there's a lot of law enforcement, I recommend that try communicating. If it doesn't work, make a complaint.
Okay, thank you. From Beth in Saugerties, a lot of Saugerties people. Do you know if your officers are participating in militias or went to Washington, D.C. on January 6th? And how can you assure the public that no officers are involved in any radical groups?
Well, first of all, that's against our sheriff's office policy. So if they did do anything like that, they would be in violation of our policies and would be written up. There was no agency, whether it was the FBI or a local municipality down in the DC area, that reached out to us to ask us if somebody, or to tell us if somebody was involved. I have no reporting that any of our folks went down there, and nor do I have any evidence that any of our folks belong to any hate groups. And if they do, they probably won't be working very long for this sheriff.
Is there a way that you can monitor that?
The only way we can monitor it is if someone makes a complaint, or if we find out. If somebody, usually that's how it works. Somebody makes a complaint that someone's part of a hate group, and then we'll assign our internal affairs investigator or our professional standards investigator, and he'll look into it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Here's a question from Amy of Woodstock, and we know who Amy of Woodstock is. She wants you to discuss community policing, the state of community. When you ran for office, you ran on one of the platforms was community policing. How is that going now, and what can you tell us about it?
The pandemic really put a halt on some of the plans that I had in regards to community policing, but they're still on. Once this ends and we can have face-to-face meetings, we're going to do that. I have the cadet program. I have the yellow dot program, which is, if folks don't know, it's a program that if you have a medical issue, you put a yellow dot in your the back of your windshield and back of the window in your car, and you have medical instructions and your medications in the glove box. We also have our car seat program. We have demos like canine demos and water rescue. The Citizens Academy that we're going to start up after the pandemic ends. The deputies that work in areas like Shandaken, Olive, and even in the areas where local municipalities have police, you're going to start seeing the local deputy that works in that zone show up at the town hall meetings. That's something that I wanted to do last year, but unfortunately with the pandemic, I didn't do it. We've been very successful with the cadet program as we hired 2 folks from there. We also have the summer camp as well. And there's also a project that we're involved with at the Sheriff's Association that assists folks that wander, that have Alzheimer's or dementia. And we put transmitters on them. So if they do walk away from their home, we're able to, check that transmitter and locate their loved ones. So, we are going to improve the way we communicate with the people, and community policing is still on my agenda. The pandemic really put a hold on a lot of that stuff.
Okay, we've gone through the official questions, and at this point, we're really in good shape because it's 5:56, and I know people might be interested in the Super Bowl, which starts in a half hour. So at this particular point, maybe you could do a final wrap up of some points that you feel weren't made that you want to make sure that we are aware of before we go. Before you do that, I just want to say one more thing. I was joking earlier when we were waiting before this happened, before everyone came on, and I said to Juan that I often joke about that I never in my life knew the sheriff, the DA, and the judges, and I tried to avoid them, quite honestly. And I just want to say that this is for me anyway, that Juan is the first sheriff I know who has regular town halls. And I thank you for that, Juan. And I know we're going to see you in person, but I think it's really important that these town halls continue. And in a live person to person, you'll actually be able to interact and not have this false thing of us looking at questions. So with that said, I thank you for that. And if you could just give a little wrap up.
I want to tell you what I'm going to do next year or this year. Well, first, I hope everybody makes it through the pandemic. I know every one of us have suffered in our own ways, whether it's not working or not seeing your loved ones, or even getting sick with COVID. I strongly recommend, and I know there's some doubters out there, that you get the vaccine. Extremely important that we end this pandemic and try to protect really humanity, because it could be something now, but it can evolve into something much, much worse. I know I spoke about the cadet program and the Citizens Action, the Citizens Academy. We also are going to roll out a HERO program, which really discusses officer wellness, because we have a lot of officers that, number one, have been deployed overseas to different locations in the world, the active war zones, and then they come back here and suffering from PTSD, and nothing's done. And so, hurt people. And I think, a lot of people don't understand what the officer goes through in their entire career, whether it's a shooting or a bad homicide scene or a bad accident scene that affects people. Even the adrenaline rushes when you're following or chasing folks that are committing really heinous crimes.
So glad you guys are all censoring the chat.
Sorry about that. I don't know. So, I think officer wellness is something that we need to work on as well. I have a new public information team. We're going to continue these town hall meetings, and I can assure you that our deputies and our supervisors, our sergeants and lieutenants are also going to attend actual town hall meetings in the town halls. Project Lifesavers, what I was talking about, is the transmitter for folks that have dementia and Alzheimer's. The Yellow Dot program involves if somebody got into an accident. I talked about that. The VINE program, victim information notification every day, notifies victims and witnesses when of crimes of the status of release of a defendant that's in custody. That's also going to be on the app. The Ulster County Sheriff's Foundation have given scholarships. We didn't do anything this past year, but we're hoping to kick that up again this year. The partnership between Ulster County Community College and I didn't tell you about this, is Bard College and the Civil Prep program. So if they're at Ulster County Community College and they have an associate's degree, they would sponsor them in the prep program and then ask them to continue their education at Bard College so they can get their 4-year degree, which I think is amazing. And my hat's off to Bard College and Ulster County Community College meeting with me to discuss this program. The advisory boards are going to be huge. I expect a lot of people on these calls, whether you agree with me or not. If I wanted people to agree with me all the time, I'm in the wrong line of work. I need to have different perspectives from the folks out there who have bad interactions with law enforcement. We all have our stories, including me. And I can tell you that the only way we're going to get this, we have an opportunity right now to change law enforcement for the better. I am going to latch on to that. I'm going to listen to a lot of you folks out there and work to get this better, whatever it's going to take. And I look forward to working with all of you, our religious leaders, Harambe, our Human Rights Commissioner, Kingston Business Alliance, our town supervisors, our DAs, judges, and our probation officers. So again, I want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to represent you and talk with you. And I look forward to seeing you in person when the pandemic ends. Thank you.
I have to say that I look forward to that as well, because I know it'll be more interactive. This is kind of a false way with this Zoom and I reading from a sheet here. I want to thank everyone for coming, and you can unmute. And if you want to say hello to Juan or whatever, unmute, and thank you, Juan.
Thank you, Juan.
Muchas gracias, Juan.
Hola, ¿cómo está?
Bien, lo más bien, gracias.
Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Juan.
Juan. You be safe.
Muchas gracias a usted.
Igual.
Thanks,
See you
everybody.
soon.
Hello, Miss Maud.
Okay, Juan,
Keep
how
up
you
the-
doing?
I talked to your grandson, by the way. He called me.
Juan, I think you did a good job.
Thank you.
Me
Very
too.
impressive, Juan.
Okay.
This is
Keep
very
up the good work.
You must be a politician.